All protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. As part of our sensitization, I'm going to share with you some key points from the laws of Trinidad and Tobago with regards to the scrap iron industry. As many of you would know, the scrap metal industry in Trinidad and Tobago is governed by the Old Metal and Marine Stores Act of 1904. It says once you're a dealer of scrap metal, you must be licensed under the Act. Now, these licenses are granted by and at the discretion of the licensing committee of the district in which the premises are to be situated. The licenses are annual and terminated on the 31st of December of the year for which they are granted. For example, a license granted in 2022 will expire on the 31st of December 2022. It also says every licensed person shall keep a book which he shall legibly enter in ink the date and hour of the day when any old metal are purchased or received, the name in full and the residence and occupation of the person from whom any such metals are purchased and received, and in the case of an agent, the name and addresses of the principal, the quantity purchased and received, and the price paid. Now, every entry shall be made at the time of the sale, purchase, or dealing, and shall be signed by the licensee or his agent and by the vendor or his agent. The Act also states that no person shall purchase or receive any such old metal except between the hours of 7 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the evening. No person shall receive any old metal from persons under the age of 16 years, neither should they employ any person under the age of 16 years to purchase or receive such metal. According to this Act, any police officer may inspect any such book as mentioned before, and all old metal in the premises of a licensee under the Act at any time when the licensed premises are open for business. It is important to note, old metals purchased and received by a licensed dealer shall be kept in the licensed premises and shall not in any way be changed in form or shape or disfigured for a period of at least 15 days after it has been purchased. Now, every person licensed under this Act who, after notice has been given by him or her by any police or by advertisement in the newspaper that any old metal have been stolen or fraudulently obtained, fails to give information to the police that articles of the like description were offered to him or were in his possession is guilty of an offense against the Act. It should be noted that any person found guilty of any offense against this Act is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $15,000. And if a person licensed under this Act is convicted of any offense against the provision of the Act, the court may, if sees it fit, cancel the license of the person. Now let's take a look at the new policy and what it says. Please note that this is just a draft policy and has not been proclaimed. According to this proposed policy, the scope of the Old Metal and Marine Stores Act is outdated and does not allow for the effective management of the scrap metal industry. As a result, it recommends that it must therefore be amended. In accordance with the Old Metal and Marine Stores Act of Trinidad and Tobago, the responsibility of the issuance of licenses to deal in scrap metal resides with the magistrate's court. It is therefore recommended in this new policy that the licensing regime be moved from the purview of the magistrate's court under the judicial arm of the government and be transferred to the Ministry of Trade and Industry under the executive arm of the government. Under the new policy, the registration as a scrap dealer will be for 5 years as opposed to 1 year when compared to the old Act, and must be renewed on or before the expiry date if the registered person intends to carry on further business as a scrap metal dealer. The new policy says scrap yards must be inspected by an inspector from the trade license unit to ensure compliance with this policy. Additionally, containers, vehicles, or other vessels which are used or intended for transportation of scrap metal must be inspected by a police officer from the nearest police station. It shall be mandatory for all exporters and dealers to keep control sheets for each transaction where products are purchased and must include the specific details. These control sheets must be approved by the customs officer performing the inspection of the shipment being loaded. Under the new policy, no person shall purchase or receive any scrap metal from any person under the age of 18 years, and no person shall employ any person under the age of 18 years to purchase or receive scrap metal. A person shall not deal with any in scrap metal with any person who is under the influence of any intoxicating liquor or drug, especially when the condition is visible or apparent. Also in the draft policy, all scrap metal dealers shall not receive scrap metal from a person without verifying that person's full name and address. In addition, sellers must provide proof of identification, such as national ID, driver's permit, passport, and utility bill, before a transaction could take place. In the event that a person wishes to export scrap metal, an application to the trade license unit for an export license must be made. To operate as a scrap metal exporter, an individual should meet the specific criteria. Under this new policy, a collector's license authorizes the licensee to carry on business as a mobile collector of scrap metal. To operate as a mobile collector of scrap metal, an individual will be required to meet the specific requirements set out in the policy. Under the new policy, the packing of scrap metal into containers by licensed dealers in preparation for export shall be allowed to take place at licensed dealers' sites approved by the trade license unit. It says all loading sites must be subjected to 24-hour CCTV video surveillance. If there's a break in the surveillance, then all containers packed during the period will need to be offloaded and repacked under the requisite supervision. Now here are some of the penalties listed in the new policy. Any person found guilty of failing to register a scrap metal dealer or to notify the trade license unit of alterations in the appropriate particulars shall be liable to, on conviction, to a fine not exceeding $50,000. Any person found guilty of failing the proper prescribed records shall be liable on conviction to a fine of not exceeding $50,000, and any person who obstructs the entry of an authorized inspector or fails to produce any book or document which the officer has a right to inspect shall on conviction be liable to a fine not exceeding $30,000. Now, this new policy has addressed the major issues identified by stakeholders affecting the scrap metal industry following consultations conducted during 2012 to 2013. It is therefore anticipated that this policy, when implemented, will alleviate some of the issues currently plaguing the industry. So, those were some of the points on the Old Metal and Marine Stores Act as well as the new proposed policy. We will be sharing them on the Trinidad and Tobago Scrap Iron Dealers Association Facebook page for further reference. Thank you.